I'm Dr. Darlene Montezana. I am at Prince George's Community College. It's October the 5th, 2013. I'm conducting an interview for the Veterans History Project with Colonel Jimmie Drummond for the office of Congressman Donna Edwards. Where were you born?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to participate in this project. I was born in Spartanburg, South Carolina, so shortly after that, though, my family moved to the West Coast. So I was actually raised on the West Coast.
What did your parents do? What was their occupations?
Well, it's interesting. My mom is actually a nurse. She's retired now and had been a nurse for many years. My father actually was a truck driver, and so that's kind of what they, what they did and kept them busy.
Okay. Do you have brothers and sisters?
Yes, I do. I have 2 brothers and 3 sisters, 4 sisters actually, and they are spread out mostly along the East Coast.
What were their names?
Well, I have Marie Hersey, and Anita Benson, and Brenda McIntyre, and then my brothers are Michael Drummond and Edwin Drummond.
Were any of them in the military?
No, I'm the only one. That's interesting. I tried to do some recruiting, that's the best way to say it, and they've been interested, but I'm actually the only one that entered the military. And
what were you doing before you entered the service?
Well, before I entered the service, of course, I'm a physician and a Howard graduate, and did a residency training in family medicine. I had been a family physician and emergency medicine physician since actually around 1990 up until around 2000. And 2000 is when I volunteered and enlisted in the Air Force Reserve. So.
Okay. Why did you choose the Air Force?
I have to tell you, the Air Force to me just personified what I wanted to become. I've always had an interest in aviation, and then an opportunity to become a flight surgeon through training, get the aerospace medicine and occupational medicine training was very appealing to me. And so, looking around, I said, man, the Air Force has exactly what I'm looking for, their mission, the opportunities that were there, and then opportunity to serve in various places around the world and learn about flight and become a rated air crew.
So you entered the service as a fully licensed physician. So what kind of training did you get?
Well, it turns out when I enlisted, when I joined, I received a commission as a major. So part of that training coming as a physician involved training for combat-related medical training. So combat medical readiness training, I had to go to officer training school. I subsequently went to aerospace medicine school where I earned my flight surgeon wings. And so just various training, mostly around taking care of soldiers and families, and which is a mission I very much embrace, and of course as heavily on the leadership side as well for the officers that are going to be making decisions and leading in these environments.
So did you also have to do basic training before you did all of that, or were you exempted?
Well, no, I wasn't exempted, but coming in as a reservist, there was a officer training course that I had to take. I believe it was down in Alabama, and it was 2 weeks, a lot of leadership training, some physical training, and it was very enjoyable.
Do you remember any of your instructors?
I do. I remember this one lieutenant colonel, I'm blocking his name, but at any rate, I remember when I was deployed to Iraq, I remember this one scene where during training, we were actually out in the woods training, carrying an injured soldier, and I had a couple of flashbacks about that when I was actually training, because we were simulating gunshots and things like that, and there it was real in Iraq. And so I remembered that training that we had, and it took me back to that experience.
How did you adapt to military life?
How did I adapt? I went in all the way. I mean, I have taken my military career very seriously with my education, the training, every opportunity that I had to get additional training, I've taken advantage of. So to me, it's both an honor to serve and to wear the uniform and represent the values and the core values and mission of the Air Force. So I adapted fairly well. The other thing I like about it is the physical training requirements of it to help keep you in shape.
What about barracks, food, social life?
Well, as a reservist, of course, there are times when I'm on active duty, and I've spent a fair amount of time on active duty since 2001. Barracks, it turns out the Air Force is actually probably a little ahead of some of the other services. Usually, though, when you're deployed, you're in a joint environment with all the services, including foreign troops as well. So I thought they were actually pretty good. Being an officer, one of the senior officers is probably a little bit better than being in the other ranks and so forth. But I felt very good. I knew when in a deployed environment it's rather austere. You're not going to have the amenities of home and so forth. And so you adapt and innovate and you overcome whatever barriers you have to deal with.
Does today's technology allow you to keep contact with your family more than perhaps in previous years?
That was one of the refreshing aspects of being deployed during the time I was in Iraq. We did have access to computers and were able to, through Skype and other ways, stay connected. So that was very, very good.
So where have you served?
Well, I serve here presently on the home front. I'm actually what's called an IMA, an individual augmentee, mobilization augmentee at Andrews, where I've served prior to this, of course, doing deployment in Balad, Iraq, and then also when another time here, right at Andrews at Malcolm Grove Medical Center for a year as well as a flight surgeon there.
Well, you said they gave you the opportunity to travel all over the world. So what places did you go?
Well, I probably haven't taken as much advantage of that aspect of it. I mean, I've been to Germany, flown through different ports where I didn't actually stop, down in the Caribbean, and of course Iraq, Qatar, places like that, mostly in the Middle East is where I've been.
Okay. So what memories do you have of your service abroad?
Well, during the deployments, of course, in a war zone, you can imagine being a physician, being a flight surgeon, you're dealing many times with troops that are very severely injured, unfortunately some that have been killed. So the memories I have basically is one of being really a lifetime and working with a team there of nurses, very dedicated nurses and technicians that we went all in, and we did the best job we could do to try to get troops back home and so forth. So on that side of it, there were a lot of memories. On the state side of it, it's a lot of memories of keeping air crew qualified, making sure they're fit, doing what I do as a physician to prevent illness and treat what we do see, and try to make sure that our airmen are fit, prepared, and medically ready for whatever mission they may be called to do.
Now, you made a reference that you were in the service at 9/11. How did you...
How was that?
Yes.
Well, honestly, it's interesting because it was my second day on reserve duty, my first reserve duty. Had started at Andrews, actually, September 9th. And so when September 11th happened, I never will forget, I was watching on the news when that second plane went into the World Trade Center. And I remember just going outside quickly to see if I could look over towards the Pentagon, Northern Virginia area, and I saw the smoke, and I knew that this was real and that everything that we had been trained for was probably going to start happening pretty quick. And of course, shortly after that, I was called up for a year of active duty. So it was a very riveting, yet honestly, for me, I was happy in a way because I was in a position where I could be one of the responders. I could go do something about it, and I do know there were a lot of people that felt frustrated because maybe they weren't in a position to do anything about it, but I was happy that, hey, I could do something about it and be part of a solution to make that wrong right.
So you were at the Pentagon?
Well, what happened was I was at Andrews when it happened, and later on I was called down to the Pentagon with a group of other physicians and nurses and technicians down there to try to deal with the casualties and the aftermath of the tragedy. You
said a year of active duty. How many deployments have you served on active duty?
Well, actually, I did that one that I mentioned. In 2006, I was the troop commander for a group of medics and nurses and technicians that went to Iraq. And so those are the two major deployments, and there have been other short ones, short little tours of duty, so forth.
So when you're not deployed, what are your normal duties?
Okay, so my current duty is I work for the Secretary of the Air Force's office there at Andrews, and my job basically, I'm part of what's called the Disability Evaluation or the Board for Correction of Military Records. And essentially what we do is we make sure that the Air Force review actions and judgments and disability determinations and appeals to make sure that the Air Force is correctly adjudicating disability evaluations and different judicial actions that occur. And so I have a role in reviewing that to make sure the oversight was proper and actions were done. And if there was an inaccuracy or an inequity, to recommend to the Secretary's office, how do we correct that?
So as a flight surgeon, you're not necessarily on the front lines, but you're right there when casualties, et cetera, occur.
Yes, flight surgeons work in different capacities as a squadron flight surgeon in what's called an aeromedical staging squadron, which is what I was part of. You very much can be right on the front lines doing combat medic duties, working in what's called a CASIF, which is a contingency aeromedical staging facility, which we had set up both here at Andrews and in Iraq. Okay. And you're taking casualties right out of the field or from the combat surgical hospitals that the Army has. And so you along with the whole team of nurses and technicians and medical service administrators and really everyone, you're configured so that you're what's called an expeditionary force. You can be moved, you can be modular, and go where you're needed in terms of dealing with casualties and injuries.
So would you also go with the flight that would take the injured like to, what is it, Ramstein? Yes,
yes. I flew in a lot of those missions where we were taking injured service members. Some of them are critically injured on basically life support. Flying those missions from Baghdad International Airport to Ramstein Air Base in Germany, where Landstuhl Medical Center is, right. Making those trips back and forth. And so I was able to be a part of that as well.
That has to be daunting.
Well, it's both daunting and a privilege to be there, knowing that you're really on the front line of both saving lives, trying to use your skills and help others to use their skills in the best way to get people back to their families. It's daunting, it's tiring, but at the same time it's very gratifying. And inside, it's personal as far as what you're able to do to try to bring comfort and restore a pretty devastating situation in some cases.
What kind of friendships did you form during your deployment in your service? What kind of camaraderie was there?
Yeah, I honestly have to say before deployment, it was really hard to understand the bonds that do form. But I can honestly say that once you have been in that environment, serving with other service members, you really do actually form that family bond. And even to today, if I were to see any of those people, you know, it's something special still there. And so that privilege and opportunity to really broaden your own extended family, when, of course, while you're there, they are your family. That's really all you have. And so, so that was very gratifying and still is to today.
You stay in touch with them?
Some of them I do. You know, look them up on Facebook if I haven't seen them, or send them a message. Some are in the area still. Others have retired and move on. You know, dealing with the stress of that can be overwhelming at times. So, but yeah, when we can, certainly we reach out and try to support each other and stay connected.
So when you're deployed, and you're talking about the stress, what do you do for recreation? You know, how did you relieve stress?
Well, that's a very important issue. When you're working 6 days a week, 12 to 14 hours a day, you get very exhausted. And so I always encouraged our troops to find a balance, exercise. If you have a movie script you're trying to write, bring that, because you'll probably get a chance to do some of it. The spiritual piece is very important. Talking with the chaplain and spending time with the chaplains and participating on that level was very good for me. We had some very outstanding chaplains there. And then just trying to balance little things, like instead of maybe going to the DFAC, which is a dining facility, maybe you go to one of the little fast food places and get a burger and something a little different. And then, of course, staying connected spiritually, physically is what you do, and then socially to try to keep that balance in check. And then for me as a commander, taking care of our people, making sure they were good.
Right. Mm-hmm. When you finished your deployment and you came back to the States, how did you feel?
A big sigh of relief, I think, is probably the best way to put it. Although initially, like other troops, I had, you know, some pretty vivid memories and dreams and things of that nature. I mean, my wife can tell you that it took me a bit of time to adjust being back. So just getting familiar with things that you hadn't seen for a while, you'd be surprised how different being in that environment is. Everything's brown and dusty. Coming back and just being around your family and seeing the difference and changes, it was really, you know, really helped me to transition fairly smoothly, I think.
So how did your community and your family receive you when you came back?
It was open arms. I have to honestly say that my church also was a big part of that. We have a ministry that started subsequent to my coming back for a military care ministry that was very instrumental. But just people were just received very well. I mean, I never will forget coming back. I guess we had just come stateside, coming into the airport. It might have been somewhere like New Hampshire, whatever. There were a group of, I guess, retired veterans and people from the just well-wishers, and you know, were hugging you and congratulating you. And unfortunately, some of the veterans that have come home from other wars or what have you didn't get that reception. But I have to tell you, it wasn't expected, and it really made you feel good to be an American and be back home in the country. I appreciated your service.
I know that several of the veterans organizations have their volunteers that are at the airports for just that purpose.
It means a lot.
Yeah.
Those smiling, welcoming faces and people thanking you for your service, it was priceless.
So do you have children?
I do. I have, well, 3 sons. They're doing very well in college, moving on, professional athletes, and my one son is, my youngest one is in college, and the middle one's in grad school, so the boys are doing very well.
So they were teenagers when you were overseas?
They were teenagers when I was overseas. They did very well taking care of mom and taking care of things around home. I commend them a lot for that, and you know, that support was just invaluable because I wasn't having to worry about what was going on here when I'm focused on, needing to focus on there, what was happening there.
Are you a member of any of the veterans organizations?
Well, of course, being a VA, being a veteran, let's see. I have to honestly say that I've been looking into getting more involved with the veterans organizations. I did get information from AMVETS, and that's an area that I want to get more involved in, the Wounded Warriors Project,
right.
Being involved in that. Through my church, actually, though, we support several of the veterans organizations through outreaches to the VA hospital, the homeless veterans, and things, and those types of activities and organizations we support. And
you are still on active military duty, right?
Yes, I am. I'm a reservist, active reservist, and still doing my reserve duty, and so I've been since 2000, and my plan is to retire in 20 years.
How many years in?
So I have 13 years in, and I'm looking forward to another 7 good years.
Okay, very good. You're not separated from the military. How did your experiences in Iraq affect your life view?
Well, that society, as you know, their culture is much different than ours. What I realized at sort of the base level is that many of the blessings and just our society and how we take care of each other, in that society, it's not there. So the culture is very different. We are actually very blessed to be in a country where we have our liberties, we can pursue happiness, and we have the rule of law. And so it really, I think, increased my appreciation for what we have here in our Constitution and our form of government, and really the opportunity to serve in the military and be a part of such a great country, and be part of a solution to protect our country and what we have here.
Do you want to discuss your medals and your accommodations?
Well, over time, of course, when you're really involved in what you do, believe in what you do, volunteer for certain duties, you're going to be recognized. And so probably the medal that means the most to me is the Iraqi Campaign Medal, because there, for all the training that I received, I was able to actually use the skills that I had acquired to save lives and to bring comfort to wounded troops, and to get them back home safely as much as we possibly could. So the opportunity to do that probably is the one that means the most to me. Of course, my flight surgeon wings here mean a lot too, because it afforded me the ability to be part of air crew, to participate in aeromedical evacuations and so forth, and really get the kind of training that is very, very good as a physician to have, and really, I really enjoyed that.
So can you tell us what your ribbons mean?
Well, I have, I think there's about 10 or 11 of them here. Essentially, what it means is, I think the core values of the Air Force, which is integrity first, service before self, and excellence in all we do. And I think as you participate, lead, exemplify those core values, the medals will come. I'm proud of them, but I realize they come because of service and really being focused on the mission and just doing excelling the best you can.
You've brought us an artifact today. Would you like to discuss it?
Well, that is a first aid bag for an aircrew first aid bag, and it reminds me of what I do as a flight surgeon. Say if I'm in say a C-130 coming out of someplace, wherever it might be, that's just a reminder of what some of the supplies that are there. That just happens to be a first aid bag, which could be used in any. We have a lot more equipment that's a lot more elaborate than that. But your basic first aid bag really gets to what you do as a physician or a healthcare team person, taking care of those, your air crew or passengers that are on that plane. Just being there in a humanitarian role to provide the basic level of medical care in this sense, but in a broader sense, to use your expertise in whatever way to be of comfort, to bring healing as much as you can to our aircrew and our service members, and that's what we're about, and that reminds me of that.
So how did you receive this, and do you know anything about its history?
Actually, one of my comrades gave me that bag. I think I was a lieutenant colonel at the time. So it was a gift. I think at the time when I penned colonel, I was given that gift. What was the second question you asked me?
The history behind it?
Oh, the history behind it. Well, I believe that this particular bag was probably around Vietnam era or early 80s of first aid bag that would have been just part of either a bag that one of the flight medics or physicians would have carried, or actually part of equipment that was on an aircraft. And so, the color green like that tells me that it would have been used probably in some of the aircraft that were used in a forward deployment. So
okay.
it probably was on some aircraft that were right in the midst of some conflict or that nature.
Okay.
So, but again, it reminds me of my mission as a physician, as a flight surgeon, that what I do is bring healing as much as I can.
What message would you like to leave to future generations in this interview?
Well, I would say that it's been such an honor for me personally to wear the uniform, to serve in the U.S. military as a flight surgeon. And I would just encourage the younger generation to look at military service as a way to give back. We've been really blessed in this country to have the ability for life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And this country's given us a lot. So through military service would be one way to give back. It's an honor to wear the uniform, and I think it helps you grow personally and even professionally in my case. So I would just say to those in the future generations that are coming behind me that it's been an honor, and I think you will find much of what I said to be true if you volunteer and become part of the U.S. military.
Are your sons interested in a military career?
I'm working on them. They're busy in college and pursuing their different goals, but maybe someday one of them may look at Dad and say, "Hey, maybe I'll give that a try." But I know that just from their reactions, they've been we're at my colonel pen ceremony, that they're very proud of what I've done, and that I think it would be good if, even if not them, maybe their children would consider either a career in the military or being a reservist as I am.
What would you like to add to this interview
Well,
that we haven't discussed?
Okay. Well, I think I've spent a lot of time kind of talking about me, but I just want to commend those junior airmen, enlisted troops that are out there making this mission happen, to the leadership for the job that they're doing. But I just feel that our enlisted troops do a lot of the heavy lifting. This mission would not be possible without them, and so as an officer, I just want to say that I'm able to do what we're able to do what we do as a team, because we have some very fine, dedicated, enlisted troops and officers that make us all successful, and I just want to take hats off to them as well.
Thank you very much, Colonel Drummond,
You're welcome.
for being with us today, and thank you for your service.
You're welcome, ma'am. I'm glad to do it.